I'll now call the meeting of the Board of Trustees, New Trier Township to order. We do not have our clerk here. Checking. I will call the roll.
I was gonna say, do I need them?
Agenda packets. Trustee Rubin. Here. Trustee Moser, absent. Trustee Robbins.
Here.
Trustee Cassell McNally. Here. Supervisor Eisenberg here. Clerk Coynes, absent. Assessor Churchwell, not present. Administrator Hopkins, not present. We have some illnesses going through Township. We'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, supervisors reports. I hope everyone had a lovely holiday break and a happy new year. Though it's not our new fiscal year, we still had to, we are starting to prepare for next year because we'll be welcoming our guests from the committees, which is a big part of, obviously, of our next year's budget. So we really appreciate the time and effort that you've spent going through the proposals. Since our last meeting, a couple of things, highlights in the role. I got to go over to Northfield Township to do their sexual harassment prevention training. So now I have a slide deck if you need township specific sexual harassment training in Illinois. Obviously our township staff has gone through my trainings before, so they didn't need to repeat. They just went through it on their own this time as a part of the in-service to make sure we're all in compliance. I also attended the Jewish United Fund's government officials breakfast, which was a really great opportunity to meet with other officials from the area and to hear from the various agencies that they represent, because they do a lot with senior services, disability, domestic violence, and youth. So some of their legislative agenda is similar to what we would want to see for some of our other agencies, even though I don't believe we're currently funding any of their agencies that we have in the past, especially CJE. Food pantry manager took up, the search took up a lot of the last couple weeks. We went live right after the new year on LinkedIn with the job description. Keeping you all in compliance as well. You have to post to the salary and benefits as of January 1, 2025. So we were fully in compliance. I think that really helped to make sure that people who applied knew what they were getting into, knew what the whole package looked like. So we did have 28 people apply.
Wow.
I would say 10 were great applicants and interviewed 3 so far, 2 more on Thursday morning. So we're hoping to be able to move forward soon with the current applicants that we have. But I was really impressed. I did have one person that I offered an interview to who rescinded because he wanted to negotiate the salary. That's why I posted it. So you knew how much it would be. So that is going very well, and hopefully we'll be able to have a little bit of overlap with Brian then with a start date in February at a part-time basis so that they can start full-time at the new fiscal year. Yep.
And we're calling that a full-time position.
It is a full-time position.
What is the salary, if you don't mind?
$25 an hour.
25 an hour, 40 hours a week,
Yep. Well, and it would be, this one is overtime eligible.
because of food drives and things like that, and weekend hours. And who's sitting in on the interview process?
Right now it's Larisha, Brian, and I. So there are 3 of us, and we are using a structured interview. So same questions asked to the same to every individual. And everybody gets until my free Zoom account turns off.
Those are the 3. No, those are the 3 people you'd want at the table for that.
Yep, absolutely. And Larisha was in for a moment and then she disappeared. That's okay. All right, I'm seeing minutes from December 10th, 2024, as far as approval of the minutes goes. Are there any questions on the minutes?
I literally just received these now.
Me too.
And I am not prepared to, review these, on the mute. I
Absolutely.
need time to review this.
Yes, these were not included in our board packets. For the board's edification, we have asked that Clerk Coins provide the draft minutes by the Friday before the meeting, so that they can be posted, and to respect our staff's time as well. And we are missing December and October, minutes at this point. So we will, if with the approval of the board, I would entertain a motion to, table the approval of the minutes.
We have December, they're just late.
There, and yes, we haven't had time to really take a look.
It arrived to two of us at 12:56 this afternoon and was not sent to the rest of the board.
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None,
Oh, no, that's.
they are tabled. Clerk's reports,
Sounds very simple.
seeing no clerk, we will skip that.
There's what?
Oh, what's going on? She's gone again. All right, the financial report, James is here, so we will go ahead and make him our. All right, James, show is yours.
All right, thank you. I'm going to share my screen and we'll walk through the 10 months ended December 31. I'm sure everybody's excited as CPI comes out tomorrow. So again, that's something we always look forward to, seeing where we lie in terms of the tax cap. 2.7 was last month's read, so we'll see if that went up some. Again, I still think we'll be under 3% for the year. And again, we'll levy for that in 2025 and then receive it in 26. But let's look at the financials in terms of the revenues for the year. We're at 83% of the way through. We've collected 3.7 million, so a little bit more in terms of taxes than what we had budgeted. Again, replacement tax, that one's down slightly at 61%. We will still receive another payment from the state for that line account, but remember, they did recoup some of that money. And so we're seeing a lot of our local governments down year on year in terms of replacement tax. Interest is a beat for the year. You see, we've already collected 96,000 there, so that's almost double what we budgeted. So that's the good news. The Fed is going to be holding on rates, it sounds like, so there may not be any more rate cuts for a while. So that's good news for us in terms of our investment positions. Passport fees is at 88%. So all in, we're at about 3.9 million on the revenue side. 3.7 million was the budget, so we're up 7%. Again, a good thing in terms of revenue. Expenditure-wise, we seem to be nicely on track with where we are in the year. You can see a lot of green there on the right-hand side, meaning we're at or below 83%. Building and town hall expenses are a little bit high at 98, and then financial assistance at 96. But all other categories, agency programs, again, we've got one more payout coming there. And then, down into our salary categories, both of those at 83. So all of that looks very good. As we look at our total position, or surplus position, I should say, with 2 months to go, we're at about 1.36 million. We started with about 1.9, so we're at about 3.3 million in ending fund balance. And again, you can see good reserve levels. And what we set out to do, remember, is to bring down the GA fund, which we're doing. You can see that's working nicely. And then we're going to be increasing our town fund. And again, that was all the targets that we laid out at the beginning of the year. In terms of the distribution, property taxes make up 95%, replacement tax 1.5%, interest 2.5%, passport fees 0.7%, other 0.1%. On the expenditure side, agency programs at 42%, childcare 5%, projects 5%, contractual services at about 6%, the assessor about 3%, building and town hall expenses 5%, financial assistance 13%, the pantry 5%, personnel about 15%, elected officials 1%. So again, a beat on the revenues and expenditures. We've got still 2 months to go. So again, those positions that we talked about earlier will come down some. I won't go through every line account in terms of the budget. But again, when we come all the way down here to our cash position, pretty much mirrors that fund balance. So 3.2 million across all accounts. Again, we're getting a little bit better than 4% in our managed accounts. And again, that should hold for a while, as I don't see any Fed cuts coming anytime soon. We have come down a little bit in the BMO accounts. And again, we are going to look to implement Illinois funds then into our portfolio. And again, we'll look to do that as we receive more tax monies come this February into March. But that concludes my presentation, but I'd be happy to take any questions from the board.
I have some questions. I'm looking at the reconciliation detail. It's our page 36 of the board packet. This is for the BMO checking town fund, 5617. And then it continues on for, you know, a couple of the other pages and the other accounts. I'm looking at the uncleared transactions. Do we indeed have uncleared transactions for 2.5 years now? That are going back
Yes.
to October of
that-
2022? And if
that
so,
could be-
what are the, yeah, what is the next step? What is the
Right.
correct step on this?
Right, so once they get stale past, I believe it's like 3 or 4 years, then we have to go ahead and submit those to the state. And again, from there, then they go on that unclaimed property. I think it's called iCash. So that's where they then rest until somebody claims ownership of them. So we're not quite there yet to remit those to the state, but we're close.
Yeah.
We can always reach out to these vendors and see, you know, if they receive the check or if they haven't, we can reissue some of these as well.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at in particular. You know, we have some vendors, some agency partners that, you know, I'm surprised that some of these have not been deposited, and
Yeah.
frankly, some recipients, you know, of you know, money granted, you know, on behalf of, you know, some of our constituents. So I want to make sure that, you know, we're keeping up good relationships with these people, but then also following our legal obligations, obviously, too. So yeah, I noted those for that town fund in 5617, as well as that following page, and then in the general account, or it's page 43 of our board packet, the BMO checking 7945. So yeah, those are my big comments today.
That's a good point. We should take them, see if people want those reissued. Though I've seen a lot of them are just, there's a good in December. Yeah,
But I mean, some go back to, you know, October of 2022,
yep,
and like, you know, and some of these are for significant amounts of money. so-
absolutely, yeah. Yeah, weird. You would think they would want to be paid, or at least we paid them, but they would want to be able to use them.
Okay.
Yep, thank you. Any other questions on the financial report?
Thank you, James.
Thanks, James.
While,
Oh, you're welcome, everybody.
while you're here, James, I do want to note,
Yeah.
so the financial assistance line is extremely high, as you saw, we're at 98%. We will go over our line item, based on what we're projecting for the next 2 months.
Okay.
We've seen a huge increase in use of emergency assistance, as well as general assistance, but to a lesser extent. General assistance, we have more people on general assistance than I've seen in my time here. A lot of that is from, our use of family cases to cover homeless teens. So we have a number of cases like that, where we're helping to pay for their housing. So we will need to increase that line next year, but James, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe I can move around the general assistance budget up to 10%, is that correct?
Correct, so you've got about 80,000 that you can move between the line accounts in that particular fund, yes.
So we haven't used all of our money from, for instance, we know that we aren't gonna use all the childcare, because childcare is done. So there's a couple, thousand there.
Transportation. Stuff like that.
And actually, looks like we over budgeted pantry this year, which is very
A
unusual.
really good problem.
A good problem to have. We've got a lot more food rescue this year. So that's great, because we were seeing that go balloon crazily, and obviously we had paying for food is more expensive. So I think we'll be okay as far as covering it. So I'm gonna keep approving them. But I just wanted the board to know, since it is
Awesome.
unusual.
And that 7% surplus that on the positive side, which is significant, hasn't really been allocated between general and township, has it?
Hmm.
The 7% surplus that we've received this year in terms of taxpayer revenue.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I
Yeah.
mean, it's not in our budget,
It's
right?
not in our budget, but it's there.
Sure, yeah,
and it'll show up, yeah.
right, James? This number.
Yeah, so the authority to spend comes from the budget, so you do have to still stay within your appropriation, but you're right, that will help us in terms of not only reserve levels, but to absorb, expenditures as well.
Absolutely. And I do also think that, our outreach means that people know we're here and therefore are coming to get the help when they need it. We also see a lot of the emergency assistance needs, are for rent, or mortgage payments, which are one payment, but a hefty payment. So, for a couple months, but when you've lost your job or you lost a significant other, like, you may already meet those requirements. All right, we're at verification of claims. Usually trustee Moser is in charge. We'll go with next most senior, so trustee Robbins.
I would move for, approval of the, township expenditures from December the 1st, 2024 through December the 31st, 2024, as presented to the board in this evening's packet.
Second.
Is there any additional discussion? Seeing none, we'll call the roll. Clerk Coins?
Supervisor Eisenberg,
Yes.
trustee Cassell McNally,
Yes.
trustee Robbins,
Yes,
trustee Rubin.
Yes. Okay, so that we'll sign that over on our end.
Thank you.
And we'll let the record reflect that Clerk Coins is here as well as Administrator Hopkins. We're now in line for assessors report. I'm not seeing Assessor Churchwell. So we will, oh, she's there. What am I seeing?
Could I give a report? I know
Oh,
that.
your number, okay. Okay.
I'm
Assessor
here.
All right, report?
Yes, just two things really. The first is the common non-report from the county that nothing is yet ready to start for the year 2025. However, we had our regular township assessors meeting last Friday, and one of the people who usually attends from the assessor's office said that they are hoping that the exemption forms and the booklets and things that they send out will start being ready, let's say by the end of October, end of February, instead of not until sometime in late March or April. So maybe there will be movement sooner. People always like to get going on these things because they're afraid of missing them. So they want to know when they're starting so they know when to start looking. And then the other thing is that last May, I sent a memo to Kagi's chief of staff, Scott Smith, requesting a meeting to talk about reorganizing the geographic boundaries of the neighborhoods in New Trier Township. And after some general follow-ups, haven't forgotten about you, haven't gotten to it yet kind of things, I heard on Friday, so nearly 8 months later, that he's ready to schedule a meeting. And so hopefully Len and and he said he'd like to do it in January, which I very much would too, because some of the things that I'm suggesting are simple enough that I'm hoping they can simply be signed off on, by appropriate parties and get into the system before our reassessment notices come out. Just because the whole point of doing this in the first place is to try and expand our ability to help residents get appropriate comps. So hopefully that will indeed move forward soon, and that is the end of my report.
Thank you. We look forward to hearing about it.
Jen, do you and Len have a proposed realignment in mind to give to Mr. Kagi?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
I don't know. Yes, when I wrote the memo last May, I didn't outline everything. I said, for instance, here's an example of the kind of thing I have in mind. And I also stated the goals for doing the whole thing in the first place, and said that I'm hoping that a team could be put together that would follow up on all the details and make recommendations. But I had really hoped that this would take place a little sooner than it is now. So I don't know exactly what will happen, but at least something will happen.
Thank you.
And a reminder that the assessor's budget is due on the 30th. I look forward to reviewing.
Okay, that's fine. Because of the committee reports, I was going to do it next month, but if you want it by the end of the month, that's no problem.
Right, just to me by the 30th, so it's up, we can look at it next month, yeah, exactly. Again, another one of those inputs into the budget. Okay. All right, the moment you've all been waiting for, our committee funding presentation.
Supervisor Eisenberg, would I be able to give a report? I have a couple items that.
Sure, we're recognizing clear coins.
Okay, so first I want to say good evening, everyone, and I'm sorry, I was in a waiting room, so some non-existent meeting, but I was there ready. I'm sorry I missed the roll call. Who got the pleasure of doing that tonight?
I did.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, and then I was going to ask about were both copies of the minutes approved?
We did not approve any of the minutes. We don't have the October 8th. And the December 10th was only sent to 2 trustees. Around.
Shoot, I have to look because they were all finished and I sent the other one after the last meeting, but we'll get that resolved. They're very well done. I'll put them in so that you can have them both then. The other issue, so then I want to give a very brief report. One thing, good news, I just have 3 items. One is the election thing, as I told you, no challenges, and then therefore the next duty is to file the ballot certificate. And so I did the unofficial one. I emailed that to all the trustees, board members today, so you could see just some comments on it because I'm in discussion with all sorts of other clerks. I'm very proud of our township for keeping it a political but nonpartisan. It's fantastic. So it is a political race, and one party file, as you all know, it's called the New Trier Civic Party. And one thing I admire about them, they field the candidates in their slate from both the Democratic, Republican, and probably some independents as well. And the other thing is, you'll note the geographic diversity of this year's slate. It has members from 4 of our 5 villages. So that's another thing you should note. And so I'll sign, and then if you'd all look it over, I made sure that all the spelling and the addresses and everything. One issue on that, they were asking this year for the first time for phone numbers and emails. And I did not put that in because I don't know if that will be anywhere near a ballot, but I didn't know if you wanted that information out. It wasn't part of our circulation process of the petitions. And
Is it a legal requirement?
I don't know. No, it was an option, and I just didn't know, Trustee Costello, if you wanted me to post your email and phone number.
That is an initiative of League of Women Voters Illinois. That's how they are able to invite people to the forums. We will not be participating in a forum because we are not contested.
Okay.
So we don't get that joy.
And maybe there's no need then. I just didn't know for your privacy if you wanted that just listed on there or if it's something that so I didn't, the only number and email is I use my township email because in the capacity as a local election official, and I use my phone number just in case they have any questions. So but if there's if there's any question on that, you can look it over and then I'll certify that and that'll be done. Second issue is upcoming is the annual town meeting, and we have tentatively reserved the space of the New Trier High School boardroom, which will be exciting. And we think about options of who might be a great speaker. One that comes to mind is the superintendent of schools for New Trier, Paul Sally, who would be a terrific connection between the township and the schools. I mean, after all, even though the map is a little broader, they include all the village of Northfield. We're essentially the same thing. And it would be a nice evening. Third thing.
If you can't get Paul, I have someone else. We might be able to get Al Delinko, who is the retired former president of the New Trier board. He was very instrumental in getting the new high school built. It happened, he went with the original referendum, which was a little high, they kicked it back, they lowered it a little. But if you can't get Paul, I'd say Al Delinko's a potential speaker.
Thank you, Elliot. Thank you. Great suggestion. And of
Let me
course,
know as soon as possible.
I want you to keep in mind one other issue for the annual town meeting is that we have a slew of really special awards. So if any of you on the board or in the community, by the way, could I get a listing of all the members or somehow before so that I know who's in the gallery and who the visitors are, that we can make sure that that's reflected accurately in the minutes. And I see there's some new people on the Zoom gallery too, and I just want to make sure everyone's listening. So for the annual town meeting, if you have suggestions about special people that deserve our recognition and admiration and awarding them, please keep that in mind and suggest that to us early so we can get those things set. And then on a final personal note, tonight is the 2-year anniversary of my stroke, and I want to express gratitude to the board for, first of all, to Supervisor Eisenberg for inviting me to rejoin the board when you needed a new clerk. And then to the board for approving it, and to Administrator Hopkins for everything she's done. But I think about the cognitive challenge of serving with you all has helped me tremendously. So just thank you very much. Okay, that's the end of my report.
Thank you, Jerome. And it's a really good space, nice and big, so for the wardroom space, so hopefully everybody will be there. All right, we are now online for our committee funding presentation. We will start with the disability support and funding oversight. Though we do have one trustee missing, do note that we are recording, so that both the public and that trustee will be able to review your presentations, so no worries.
Chris, all right.
Just speak loudly so our owl friend can hear you.
Sure, we get,
Whenever you're ready.
so.
Perfect.
You're welcome. Chris Iles, Chair of the Disability Committee, and it's been an honor to serve. This summary is the result of our last 4 or 5 committee meetings. And so I'll just go through, organization by organization. And these are our recommendations broken down by committee. So Arts of Life, the committee stated that the agency provided quality services, expanded internationally, and added a new client in the current year. Arts of Life has also provided pieces for the conference room that serve as a gallery for artwork from our agency partners. They continue to empower artists and give Nutra artists an international spotlight. Committee agreed to approve the amount requested of $25,000. That's what they received in 2023. So that'll be a 0% year-over-year funding. Center for the Enriched Living, the committee commented on the size of the agency. They stated that even though they might not serve many Nutra Township residents, the funding allocated does get used effectively. The Center for Enriched Living continues to provide great services to the township, along with nice paintings from the residents that are displayed in the building. The committee agreed to approve the requested amount of $30,000. That's the same from 2023. So again, at 0% year over year. Clearbrook, the committee discussed the split of the services and stated that the split might not have been in their favor. However, if one of the 2 programs closes, they wouldn't have access to the funding that was allocated for it. They requested a bifurcation of funding this year. Therefore, the risk seemed entirely on the agency for their funding. The committee also commented that they would follow up on the award letter and confirm that this new program and request more updates about the statistics of the new program, so that when they request funding in the following year, there would be a track record to compare year over year. The committee can observe. The committee had no objections to program split and approved $20,000 for residential services, which is Priscilla, and $20,000 for the community day services. There was $40,000 in 2023 and a combined $40,000 requested and approved by the committee for 2024 for 0% year over year. Glenkirk. It was stated that the agency requested funding for the following services: residential, $20,000, day and employment services, $40,000, respite services, $5,000, and behavioral health clinic, $5,000. Committee stated the agency was still serving just 5 people in the community. And even though this was one of the recommendations to increase in previous funding processes, it hasn't changed in the current year. It was also stated that in the previous year, the agency requested a total of 84,000, but only 70,000 was approved due to the number of people served remained the same. So the committee mentioned the agency was Medicare funded, Medicaid funded, and that their counselors could go off-site and bill off-site as locations where it's needed, which would include organizations like Our Place, which is a huge need for counseling services. However, they're not taking advantage of that benefit, and it could serve more New Trier Township residents than the 5 they currently serve. The committee decided to decrease the amount requested and had a comprehensive discussion about where the decrease would be fair and not affect current 5 clients served. The committee decided to withhold 6,000 from residential services and community day services and approve the following amounts: residential services 14, day and employment services 34, respite services 5, behavioral health clinic 5,000. So as a comparison, 2023 was 70,000. They requested 70,000 again. We recommended an award of 58,000, which would be a decrease of 21%. Again, structured so that it wouldn't affect the 5 currently served. Keshet. Keshet's been operating for several years, but many years, but it's a new agency to the New Trier Township Disability Committee funding program. They're also serving 50 individuals in the township, and the committee is really impressed and satisfied with their impact on the community. The committee agreed to approve the 10,000 requested, and we would really welcome Keshet as a new agency if their funding is approved by the board. So they weren't on the budget last year, so 10,000 this year. So that'd be 100% year-over-year increase as a new agency. Lamb's Farm. The committee mentioned that they were very satisfied with the services provided by Lamb's Farm and their impact on the community. It was also stated the agency is keenly aware of their challenges, which is an aging of both their infrastructure and their clientele. The committee mentioned that the new CEO seemed well suited for the role, which is evidenced in the increase of funding requested. Although they do face challenges, we are confident they'll continue to provide great services to the New Trier Township residences. The committee agreed to approve the $25,000 requested, which 18,000 was 2023. 25,000 was this year's request, which we approved subject to the board's approval, which is a 28% increase. Our house, the committee stated that it was a positive sign that they had filled the vacant room in the house, which had been languishing for a couple of years. It was also stated and agreed that felt obligated that the agency was delighted that the agency asked about the inhabitants, and they were really delighted that we asked personally about their inhabitants. It's an awkward tongue twister. And the progress throughout the year. I mean, they were just overjoyed, which of course, very interested. The committee also commented on the unique operational model and wondered why it hadn't been replicated. And they're in discussions to do that with other agencies in the area who are larger and maybe providing a roadmap. We're proud to be supporters of their unique and successful model. The committee agreed to approve the agency's requested amount of 40,000. They were at 35 last year, so that's a 12.5% increase. We're very pleased that they filled the place. And as an aside, they have a new person, a new house manager who's anti-screens and doing great. Our Place. The committee stated that the agency was really the most integrated into the community, and their participants at the food pantry, contributing to the art program, being out and about in the community. They're not just, they're really just all over the place. It's great. Not just stuck in their building. They also bought the church recently and hired a new maintenance engineer, deepening their presence in the community. And we continue to appreciate their hard work provided by Our Place in the food pantry and around New Trier Township. The committee agreed to approve the agency's requested amount of 150,000, which was 3% or 5,000 more than the previous year. Search Inc. The committee stated the agency was doing a lot of workshops in the community and that they had really transformed from where they were a couple of years ago, pre and post pandemic. Search Inc. continues to be an excellent agency partner. We look forward to a continued productive partnership. The committee agreed to approve the requested amount of 10,000. which was 0% increase year over year. Is this the agency that refunded the money 1 year?
Yes.
Yeah, this was, as an aside,
Yeah.
this is an agency that didn't use it and proactively reached out to us to, we just thought that was really,
Big respect.
it's never happened in my nonprofit experience on the planet.
Super, yeah.
Yeah, what? It was great, very highly credible. The Special Gifts Theater, the committee stated that the agency had requested funding for 2 programs, 10,000 for their Creating Outside the Lines program, which was 7,500 the previous year, and 30,000 for the musical theater program, which was 25,000 in the previous year. The committee members commented on the remarkable performance of one of the participants, and they were more than satisfied with the work that the agency was doing. It was also mentioned that the young people who helped with the participants, that were the partners, were so inspired by their volunteer work that many of them, like, it was not just one, like, it was a consistent theme that many of them then continued to explore your careers in the IDD space. And the program built significant impact on them as a result of their volunteer work. The committee agreed to approve the 10,000 for the Creating Outside the Lines program and the 30,000 for the musical theater program, which represented 18.75% increase year over year. I mean, they, as an aside, they give just the most remarkable presentation. I mean, the participants of the program, I mean, this young woman was singing, it was just Broadway-esque and just beaming, and the parents and the volunteers, it's really a remarkable organization.
The clip I posted on LinkedIn has done well.
I
And-
saw.
And as a quick side note, Chris is also now the new liaison for special.
Yeah,
gifts.
so I'm biased, but yeah, that's my conflict, but we'll give them all the money.
And they did contact us to let you know that you can go see one of their shows.
Yes, with,
Yeah.
they're with complimentary passes, so for everyone to go.
Which is
see.
under the $50 requirement. So.
Yeah.
Gift, yeah, okay.
They're just great. The Driven Foundation, this was another new applicant to the committee. The agency requested $100,000. Some members were conflicted as the service is clearly valuable. Their model is to buy handicapped vehicles for families in need. But the amount for, this would be the amount for a single family that they would have served. And that was just, we just felt that was unjustifiable. It was also stated that even though the agency was responsive to every single objection and had a remarkable ED, was a former fire chief of Wilmette, that the uncertainty of their process didn't really seem defensible. Specifically, they wanted to buy a brand new vehicle for every for a resident in need, which was obviously increase the cost of those vehicles, maybe as much as 2 to 1. Their process for selecting the families was very ad hoc. They would hear about someone and wrap their arms around them, which is needs-based, but wasn't process-driven. And then the aftermath, in the terribly unfortunate situation where the family no longer needs the vehicle through potentially a death, like what would happen to that vehicle? And there wasn't really an answer other than the nature of their process meant that the vehicle was titled and registered and insured in the family's name, so it wasn't even an asset of the nonprofit. So it just wasn't really tenable. And there were some reasons legally why they did it that way, but that underscored sort of we're just giving a 6-figure vehicle to each family. So we also stand that maybe since the amount is received, if we were to grant this, that they wouldn't be getting the grant all at once, they'd be getting it in thirds, and maybe not even able to actually accomplish their mission of buying this vehicle. How long would a Nutria resident have to wait to receive the van? Committee discussed several ways in which they could help, including a matching challenge grants, approving a smaller amount to see how they would use it throughout the year. But it ultimately concluded that the business model would not work with the Nutria Township funding process. And it's really not responsible for the use of taxpayer funds. It was also stated the agency in question hadn't filed their first 990 yet. And it would probably be best for the committee to observe them for a number of years after they've filed their returns and had another year of operation. Committee decided not to approve any funding for the agency and stated that they could stay in touch. The committee could observe their operations the next year. It was also stated that It was a good cause, but just couldn't justify the $100,000 grant request. So that's a 0% year over year. Total link to community. The committee stated that this agency keeps growing and has helped a lot of residents get hired. It also stated that what made them really unique was their hands-on approach, and being an active part of the participants' career journey. They provide great value for New Township. The committee also stated that the agency provided great and vital services to the community. Committee agreed to approve their $14,000 request for the agency, which was the same as the year prior for a 0% increase. And as an aside, what we meant by hands-on is, let's say they're able to get someone a job and the manager overseeing that participant changes for whatever reason. This agency will go back in and wrap their arms around the employee and the new manager, and really all of these agencies have a real challenge with HR turnover and retaining staff. They've got a remarkable retention rate with employees above and beyond anything I've seen from the general public. It really stands out. So I believe that's in total, we're at 442, which I believe was 420, was it? Oh, 419.5.
Yeah.
So 419.5 from the previous year, 442 for in recommendations to the board for the coming year.
Thank you very much. Are there
Thank you very
questions?
much.
Are there any questions? Noting that we will have discussion of the actual allocations at the next meeting.
I have some questions, Chris. Good presentation.
Thank you.
Starting with the Glenkirk agency,
Yes.
this notion that only 5 clients are served, that's just for the residential services program, right? The other programs serve multiple, I'm assuming they serve many, many more people. I mean, the 5 clients served is under residential services.
Yeah, correct. So a lot of these agencies have crossover, meaning they might have a resident that is also participating in other services, but we don't double count that. We want the accounting for that, but we want to know that. But if the 5 people were 3 programs, we wouldn't say they're serving 15 residents.
My recollection was like under day and employment, they have many more than 5 people involved in that. It's not 5 people total. I mean, you're not proposing that we give the, it adds up to a total
Yeah,
of Glenkirk $58,000. That's going to more than, that's going to a program that helps more than 5 New Trier Township residents.
Well, not only, but the primary concern we had in the committee was that from the last award year with these particular programs where the number was going, we had mentioned multiple times that this had to go up. So last year when they approved the cut, they said that, hey, you're at the 5 for this number. We understand you're helping other people, but for the biggest line items, the numbers haven't changed. So for those particular items, when the committee was discussing it, they had said, even in their presentation, that when they had come through, they said that, we're still working on that particular part, but the cost had gone up on their end and they were trying to help, defray the cost of it. But when the committee was talking about it, they said that, this is the 2nd year in a row they've had this problem, and the only thing that they could think to do is to cut proportionately. So they wanted to keep the programs that maybe helped more people at the same level, but anything that was still at the same participant level with those initial 5 residents, the bigger ones, that's where they proposed the cuts.
and I think we should owe the board the breakdown on the other numbers for the other programs.
Yeah, I think we need to get that
Yeah,
information
absolutely.
before we.
For sure.
Because I think the 5 is with the residential service.
Right, which is the bigger per
For sure.
resident funding.
That's all in our meeting minutes, which I'll pull for
Excellent,
everybody
excellent.
and send out to everyone.
And in the calculations of percentage increase and decrease, I think that for this particular committee, the numbers, and I blame this on Steve, weren't done quite correctly. If you reduce an agency from 70,000 requested to 58,000, that's a 17% decrease, not a 21% decrease.
That is correct.
And where that really raised the hair on the back of my head is with the agency I wanted to ask you about, Lamb's Farm.
Yeah,
If we're bumping them from 18 to 25,000, that's a 38% increase. And Chris, can you tell us what is the justification for that size of an increase? Because when you move an agency from 18 into the mid-20s,
yeah.
going forward, I mean, this is significant, so there's gotta be good justification to bump these folks up 38%.
It is, and when you know, when I look at this, you know, a 10% increase on a 6-figure number or a 30% increase on a low 5-figure number. I'm looking at those both be the same dollar amount, right? So we really focused on the broadly, you know, first and foremost, the number of new True Township residents that they're serving. Ideally, that's growing. Ideally, they have a plan to grow it. So for example, with Link to Community, they were going out and doing these meetings in the community, which seems like an easy thing to do. Go to the fire station, go to the elementary, like just go somewhere and talk to people. And they were, you know, low single digits for a couple of years. And then all of a sudden, they're doing 12 and 15, which is what we would hope and expect.
But I'm kind of asking you specifically about Lamb's Farm.
But so with Lamb's Farm, they had huge increases in needs, but at the same time, rather than just coming to us for those needs, they had identified other funding sources. So there was a real estate grant that the CFO spoke to where he was able to get $200,000. So they were, in our judgment, they had a real increase in need and they were serving the residents, but they weren't relying on the township disproportionately just because they had a need and we were a funding source. They were doing things differently and aggressively exploring other funding sources because their needs were much greater than we could ever individually fund. And although the percentage was high, the net dollar amount was not objectionable.
So that was the aging facilities and aging residents?
Yeah, they had some residents that have been there for, you know, half a century, like they just literally lived an entire lifetime with them. And so there's those specific residents now have a greater need and a greater expense associated with them. And at the same time, the physical entity itself is requiring, you know, more capital expenditures. And again, they could just say like, oh, the cost for serving these 5 residents is up 100%, but and apply that way. But part of their application, part of their presentation was really, here's our core problem that's twofold. It's the same issue affecting us in 2 ways. And here's what we're doing to address that aggressively and in meaningful ways. But we're still having, you know, still costing us more to serve the residents we're serving.
And the committee analyzed each one of those aging aspects of it.
Yeah, and again, we can't solve the world's problems. If you've got an old building that needs a new roof and you're serving all of our residents, we're not in the business of buying new roofs, right?
We don't do capital programs, right?
Right, so there's like the program cost, which is like sort of a definitive thing, like you're doing this service for these people under this, all of the structures of the nonprofit and state rules. And then there's the reality that, you know, our place didn't come to us and say, buy the church for us, you know, but we're aware they're doing that. And as an aside, in that case, they had a huge increase in their employment costs. Well, that was not because they gave everybody a raise, because they were getting all this funding. They had to hire for the first time this building engineer, which again made, when we look past their ask at their numbers and how they're doing as an organization, that was an alarming sort of huge percentage increase in one of their cost structures. And when we dug into it, it was a very reasonable.
What are their plans for the church structure? Did you guys ask them about that at our place? They've got the sanctuary. What are they planning on doing with the sanctuary?
Yeah, I've been on the committee just long enough to remember when it was a plan to acquire the church, and then I just came on just at that point, and then they successfully acquired the church. And I don't know specifically what they're gonna be doing with the specific,
And they may not have anything specific quite yet.
They basically mentioned they had purchased the church and besides what's already work has been done, they're in the assessment process of figuring out what's in the immediate fix versus what can be put off, you know, for a little while. So they have the building, they're happy about it, and they have certain parts that are already there, but they're in the process of figuring out, you know, what are the immediate fixes versus what are stuff that we can hold off in the long run. And they'll update that. We could, as we have a liaison for them as well, we'll keep them all together and updated about it.
And the church has a very substantial basement there. It used to be a polling place.
Yes.
And there's a lot of usable space there, and that came to them. So.
Oh, it's been completely redone. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're already in the basement probably and using.
Yeah.
One last
We've done
question.
their, the outreach events for the township, we've done there.
Gotta go down there and see what's going on.
Yeah.
Yes.
One final question, very specific, on the Driven Foundation, this new agency that was applying, did they have any other funding prospects or were they coming?
Creed. He went to high school with Creed, the rock star.
The band.
The band, and That's cool.
Yes.
And they had some, they had, they were getting like donations of guitar stuff and this is clearly like a great, like all nonprofits, like a great idea, somebody, a lot of bootstraps and passion. But where they're at is like they had an anonymous guy who said, hey, here's, 5 or 10 grand. And if you become a real nonprofit, I'll write you a real check. Okay. And so that sort of kicked off our, well, hey, could we give you 50 as a challenge grant to go out and raise the other? We were trying to find a way to work with them that.
It sounds like we were the only municipal entity that they were coming to for,
We're certainly the first, and I wouldn't bet against this guy being successful, but I don't think that means we should fund his initial success.
I agree with
Yeah.
the decision, not knowing much about it. Did you get the sense, this is a difficult question to you, whether they had any reasonable prospects, whether they genuinely believed, based on this early stage, that they were gonna get funding from us? What was their sense?
I get funding from us.
From the township?
Oh, I think this guy's gonna put it together, and I think he thought this would be an easy ask. If you look at it broadly, we give away $2 million. Well, how about 100 for this van for someone who's clearly in need? And, had they been around for 10 years and been doing 20 vans a year and figured out how to make $100,000 van cost 50,000, and that van would be shared with 5 families, like there'd be a way to, like Lamb's Farm has a bunch of vans.
We've kept the lines of communication open,
Yeah.
and nobody should be terribly surprised or bitterly disappointed when they get the goose egg.
Yeah, no, and
Right.
certainly not offended. I mean, we really asked great questions that he was not surprised we were asking. And I would love nothing more than to be quote unquote wrong in 5 years and eventually partner with them when they figure out the things that would make this a justifiable taxpayers, right?
Thank you, Jody.
One thing we've been really struggling with was to find a alternative for CJE's mobility transport program. which
Because
was
the
under-
pace thing isn't,
It's relatively untenable.
yeah,
So if they wanted to rework and, do something more along the lines of a mobility access and that's shared.
right. And a lot of these
That would
agencies.
be much more interested.
Absolutely, like these agencies all have a need to some degree with that. Some of the agencies have vehicles currently and are bearing that cost, and drivers are big, like, there's clearly a need that could be met in a way that could be funded. Where we
Maybe
say, wow,
shared. Yeah,
you're serving 45 residents a week, great.
exactly.
And we'll fund 10% of that,
Yeah. Cause it's very much a need in our community,
Yeah.
so. it's true.
And I also get if you have like this one family, the woman had some terrible health issue and just went instantly, completely needs a fully accessible van, right? And I can only imagine the impact on that family but there could be 500 families that would like a van tomorrow.
Exactly.
And they did the part about how do you choose, which again makes sense in the infancy of it. Easy, they're choosing somebody who has this need that they know about, to how you choose the next 20.
Right,
And then what happens over 10 years as there's a natural evolution of the need. They're just sort of into the ether.
Yeah.
Versus a mobility organization that's rotating a fleet of vehicles and serving 10 or 15 other agencies. I mean, there's somebody needs to replace pace.
right. There's a reason why our guidelines say you have to be in existence for over a year,
Yeah,
which now they are.
Yeah,
but at the
just-
time of the-
yeah, they-
Just admit it.
just fill out the nonprofit application.
So
Exactly.
it's promising, but we'll just.
The guy's a go-getter. I mean,
Great.
yeah, and he'll put something together and it'll probably evolve like all nonprofits evolve. And we've certainly kept the door open and left it
Yes.
very professional and, but it was also like 100 or nothing. He wasn't saying, we'd love to work with you for 20. It was sort of, well, we need a
Right,
van.
and that's part of the thing, was that just the sheer cost of the vehicles alone and what they need up front makes it hard with our particular model. So everyone was in favor of what they do, just not funding it through our particular process. But
Exactly.
again, in a year, 2 years, see what happens.
And their model is really philanthropy at this point. Like they're gonna need to find some philanthropists that go, this is really such a direct. I'm gonna feel good because I'm making a direct impact on these 5 families with my $500,000 donation. Great. And then it hopefully will mushroom and evolve and get behind it.
Just to remember.
Yeah, and just to add to this, first of all, I thought you did an excellent presentation of everything that we talked
Oh.
about during our meetings.
It's hard to distill that.
Yeah, it was a lot of information. I really want to applaud the committee. I thought, we were all so thoughtful. The discussions were so civil and, I align with,
Thank you.
the conclusions that you reached. Elliot, just, in response to a question that you had about Lamb's Farm, just looking at my notes from the presentation that they gave, one of the reasons that they gave for asking for an increase is that the need for more staff, but also, participants used to pay for classes. And now they are covering all the costs for classes, and they're finding that with the classes being free, they're getting more engagement. So they really don't want to take that aspect out. They want to keep the residents involved, and to do that, they really need to cover the costs.
It's kind of counterintuitive, but it's like when you invest money, when you have skin in the game, you're more attentive and you go to class. When it's given to you, you wonder, but it's a little bit, it doesn't seem.
I think the engagements, there's uppercase E engagement, what you're talking about, and then I think they're thinking we're gonna get 20 more people versus the like getting more people in the room
Getting more
versus
people.
what you're saying is absolutely right. Maybe I don't keep showing up if I'm not committed.
And, one other thing that they said, and I think we will hear this from one agency to the next, is getting enough staff and paying them what they need. And also, giving an increase to staff, but not getting reimbursement from the state.
Yeah.
So,
We're that over and over again.
Yeah.
Yes, and the history of Lamb's Farm, from my years on the committee, has been, they've been flat. They've pretty much not asked for an increase for a long time.
Yeah.
So,
And this is a new CEO, relatively new.
yes, and you guys were enthusiastic about the new CEO too.
Yeah. He definitely seemed like he had a solid plan in place and he has a good head on his shoulders and he's definitely forward looking with them. Particularly as they mentioned, the clientele and the infrastructure are both aging and we're looking to, deal with those problems, plus try to grow and continue to provide service. So between, asking us for the increase and looking for corporate sponsorships and working with other places to try to find new sources of funding, they seem like they have a good plan.
Well, the impact is old guard. And it was clear that the CEO had lit a fire under him to start thinking differently and creatively, and that it had this immediate result where they found this other source for these buildings. And they just wouldn't, I don't think without not disrespectful of the old guard, but until somebody new comes in and sort of shakes the tree, people keep doing what they're doing. And so I think he's having a positive effect on the senior level staff to say, hey, if we're just gonna be flat, we're gonna dwindle and that's ugly. But if we're gonna do this, let's do it.
One question on our residential organizations. Obviously costs a lot for housing.
Yeah.
Did the committee do any kind of analysis across those agencies to make sure we're kind of treating them relatively, same as same?
Like the Scylla versus the non-Scylla?
Right.
Yeah,
Well, and
What-
Glen Clerk and Clear Book as, per person, that kind of thing.
one of our focuses was sort of in the other direction towards our place where, are we really paying the rent for some of the parents who don't want to pay the whole cost? I mean, that's sort of the icky, unasked question. And someone brought up that getting Medicare, getting your child approved under Medicaid is like this fearful thing they don't want to do because they think it will then subjugate them to that whole Scylla world, where in reality, we were told that it opens up all sorts of other potential programs and funding sources. It's a huge net positive, but the stigma that a lot of these families have over doing that, because then it would prohibit perhaps their ability to do this other model. And they were, I forget the group out in Glen Ellen there. There's a huge version of them that exists in the western suburbs. It's been around 40 years that has figured that nuance out so that it's, again, as an individual family, you're just going to be waking up in fear every morning. And one of the things that they were going to our place and saying, hey, how many parents are interested? And then have 40 hands go up. How many would like to do this? And then all the hands go down. And there was sort of a dynamic of every parent is facing me, what happens when I'm gone?
Yep.
But I'm not but I'm here today, so I'm gonna arm wrestle this the best I can until that day comes, and so there's this odd dichotomy of the part that's sort of ickiest is the township funding families who would otherwise be funding. And how do we scale that so that that's not the thing in a way that's competitive with these other agencies without silaing everyone?
Right.
And candidly, I don't have I have a lot of nonprofit background that has nothing to do with that Scylla world. And that's so 800-pound gorilla, but I understand the Reagan era evolution out of the state programs into these Scyllas and then the private pay. We should take up what you're saying though, which is let's compare the entity organizations and see, are we at 5,000 versus 15? Who's doing it better? And is there a benchmark sort of for our residential funding that should be applied? God forbid it goes from 5 to 15.
We try to, I mean, all the agencies, all the committees try to think about those things to make sure we're not setting precedents, that we're being consistent. from
Right.
Agency to agency, when such services are similar and so on, even though no two are exactly the same.
Yeah,
You know, I was asked on the Scylla, the one with that got the fourth resident in there.
yeah,
They're all men. A couple of years ago, we were approached by a subset from that original
yeah,
corporate structure where they wanted to maybe fund for women.
women,
Have we heard anything from them, Steve?
Not since, they had that split, they came in, discussed in the committee meeting, he said he was gonna do his own thing, but I have not heard from him since, so I don't know
Yeah.
if they're still working on it or it's a separate
and
plan.
part of this was, I understand I want my child to have fewer roommates. Right, there's like a perverse incentive to getting that extra roommate, and in this case, they filled it with a brother, two brothers.
It was a great move. They needed to do it. You need
They
to
had to
have
do
one,
it,
yeah.
it wasn't tenable, and so how do you, is it if you build it, they will come? Like, do you have 5 young women right now, of those hands raised, ready to do it, or would you like the township to fund a building that, if you build it, they will come, we're not in the business, if we
Right.
build it, they will come.
But we haven't heard from them.
We haven't heard from them.
Have
on
not
this.
heard.
But there was a schism, there was a,
Bit of a schism.
Yeah.
So what was the rationale for the increase, the 5,000 increase on our house?
they have this new house manager and, it was strictly a cost, or we were at the point of maybe cutting their funding if they were not gonna fill the spot, and then they filled it and then some, and are firing on all cylinders and have, it was an expense per participant grant request.
And the house manager will have more work to do on a 4-to-1 versus a 3-to-1.
Absolutely. I mean, when he goes grocery shopping, he turns it into a treasure hunt, you know? If he doesn't say my wife says, who wants to go to Costco? Both of my kids are disappear. He's like, we're going to Costco, you know, and loads, I mean, he just turns every little thing into, and he's like a young guy that plays music and.
Yeah. He seemed like he was really, he's been there now for about 18 months.
Yeah, he's a unicorn, he's perfect. And the other woman was like the Brady Bunch mom, she was perfect.
He was great, and they were very worried when her time
Yeah.
was up.
Yeah.
How do you fill those shoes?
Right, and he would have been the last person, like, you know, you would have thought we gotta find another one of her. But it's just, you know, the universe brought them together and it seems to be working. And it just his approach to making every little thing an adventure and dragging these guys.
When he gets a little time off, who fills in?
My understanding is that the parents are all really engaged.
Good.
Yeah.
There's not a backup person.
So the parents do substitute and.
Yeah.
They don't skip a beat.
Yeah, they don't skip a beat because they can't. There has to be somebody there.
Well, thank you for presenting, and we really appreciate.
Thank you for having it. Let me
your
serve.
expertise. Yes. So we'll now go on to our life stages meeting, presentation.
Oh, thank you. Could have done without you.
But they're not here.
We work for food.
Thanks for coming to see you.
Oh,
very much.
Exactly. Welcome back.
Evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Before I review the recommendations of our committee, I want to give recognition to the volunteers who worked so hard for the last 4 months reviewing the 15 about 15 agencies. Jennifer Hull, Sharon Weingarten, Bill Lerner, Steve Hardy, Cindy Fay, Whitney Drake, Michelle Schulam. And did I say Steve Hardy?
Say Steve.
And certainly, you know, the help of our trustee liaison, Kathleen McNally. Okay. Now, I also, on behalf of the committee, want to give recognition to the gentleman to my left for his guidance and insights in our deliberations over the last 4 months. So thank you.
Thank you.
Steve.
Much obliged.
Okay, so the first agency, Alliance for Early Childhood, they requested $8,300. Last year, we approved $7,800. And as you will remember, their mission is to support healthy development of children from birth to age 8 by providing programs and guidance for parents, families, and educators. And now the $500 increase is related to a new program for expectant parents that the agency wishes to start. Now, this agency, according to the committee, to their presentation, provides services that the township already provides at the township libraries and park districts. The committee also questioned the utility of programs designed to educate the educators. And we also were concerned about the high cost of doing fundraising at the Botanic Gardens. Now, also, since the agency works with private schools, our committee questioned whether parents who have their kids in these private schools should also contribute funding to the program. Now, the agency indicated in their application that they relied heavily on annual grant funding as they work to achieve a balanced budget and are using their reserves until that happens. In essence, finally, the committee voted to approve the $7,800 instead of the $8,300 requested. The second agency was Bare Necessities. And to refresh your memory, they provide support for youth with pediatric cancer. The increase of $2,500 is requested to help additional families. This agency is well funded through grants and private donations. Nutria Township clients are 1% of the total. The agency has enough money to operate their programming without township funding. However, the agency over the last year did provide 3 Nutria Township families last year with $12,000 worth of services. The majority of the committee voted to keep the grant at $2,500 instead of the $5,000 request. The next agency, Cancer Wellness Center, they requested $60,000, $45,000 for support service, and a new grant of $15,000 for wellness programs. Last year, we approved $25,000 for their support services grant. And their mission is to give support services, wellness programs, and educational programs for individuals with cancer. The agency is well funded and has requested significant increases in the past few years while maintaining a surplus throughout all those years. However, the agency spent approximately $100,000 on services for Nutria Township clients in the previous year when they requested only $25,000. The agency also forecasts a 20% increase in township clients. In summary, the committee voted to approve the requested $45,000 for support service and their new program of $15,000 for wellness. The next agency is Center of Concern. This is a new agency requesting funding from the township, and they're requesting $5,000. And their mission is to provide housing, financial assistance, support services, and counseling for older adults and people with disabilities. In the past year, the agency spent $137 on Nutria Township clients. $137,000.
Oh, okay.
Okay, the committee agreed to approve the requested amount of $5,000. The next agency, Connections for the Homeless. This is again a new agency requesting funding from our township, and they requested $25,000. Their mission is to keep households at risk of homelessness in their homes. In fiscal year 24, Connections received over $723,000 in private funds from donors, foundations, corporations, and places of worship in New Trier Township. The committee believes that this agency is already well-funded. In addition, the agency does not have a strategic plan and has not produced an annual report for the previous year. The committee voted to not allocate funds to this agency. The next agency, Glencoe Youth Services. Again, they have multiple missions. One is to provide recreational, educational, and social services to middle and high school age youth living in New Trier Township. Two, to provide social programs for young adults of age 15 to 21 with disabilities. This is their YAP, a YAP program for young adult called Young Adult Partners. And three, a special program for adults age 22 and older who transition from the YAP program into the SNAP program, which is the Special Needs Adult PALS program. Now, for the general Glencoe Youth Services program, they requested $45,000. Last year, we approved $43,000. For the YAP program, they requested $5,000 this year. We approved last year $5,000. And for the SNAP program, they requested $10,000, and we approved last year $10,000. Now, our committee understands that the agency should not be funded unless they provide services for the whole township. 75% of the youth served by Glencoe Youth Services are from Glencoe. Although youth from other communities are welcome, with no independent access to transportation, it is not a real possibility for them. When discussing the possibility of eliminating the funding, as the agency did not meet the mandate of the township for truly catering to all New Trier Township residents, there was concern among those in the committee that eliminating funding entirely would possibly be the end of the agency if they were not given time to find other sources of income. It was suggested to grant the agency $25,000 in the current year while they look for other funding sources. The agency has $132,000 in their bank account, which is more than sufficient to run their operations. And the agency, during their hearing, confirmed that they had programming that was essentially for kids at Central School, which continues to emphasize the exclusion of other communities. When the committee voted for the youth services program, there were four options considered by the committee: $45,000, $43,000, $25,000, or not funding the program at all. The majority of the committee voted to fund the program at $25,000. The remaining programs, GAP and SNAP, were funded at the requested amounts of $5,000 and $10,000 respectively. The committee also felt that the agency needed to be aware of the importance of keeping a record of student attendance, which needs to be reported quarterly to the relevant liaison. The committee believes strongly that the rationale for the reduction of funding is the overwhelming evidence that the program is intended for Glencoe students and that the agency needs to keep track of attendees' village of residency and reporting requirements needed. Okay. The next agency, Meals at Home, they requested $25,000, and we approved them last year for $25,000. Now, our committee was concerned that even though the agency has projected a large increase in revenue, there are significant uncertainties based on the last executive director's exit from the agency and possible staff abuse claims that were publicized in the papers. There were also concerns about whether the agency would manage the funding to ensure that residents still receive meals. Last year, the agency provided $65,000 worth of services to New Trier Township clients, having received only $25,000 from the township. The committee voted to approve $25,000 as requested by the agencies. The next agency is the North Shore Senior Center, which had 4 separate grant applications. The first was House of Welcome Adult Day Services, which requests $45,000. Last year, we approved $45,000. Then the next grant is for Adult Protective Services. They requested $25,000. Last year, we approved $25,000. This year, they're asking for care coordination and counseling, $75,000. And last year, we did approve $75,000. And for the last, 4th grant, escorted transportation services, they requested $10,000, and we approved last year $10,000. Now, the committee discussed whether the escorted transportation service was being utilized to its potential. It was noted that by some of our committee members that appointments and coordination for seniors have been poorly managed, as there have been complaints that the agency did not answer the phone when called, and they didn't call back as they promised they would. It was also stated that the extent of the service was possibly insufficient, as they couldn't escort seniors in and out of medical facilities. Now, it was stated that thus far, they have spent $4,700 of the 2024 escorted services grant, which means that for the full year, it would tally around $19,000, $9,000 more than what was funded. The committee feels that the liaison needs to have monthly updates about the escorted transportation services. And then finally, the committee approved to fund all 4 programs at the requested amount. The Adult Day Services, $45,000, Adult Protective Services, $25,000, Care Coordination, $75,000, and escorted transportation services, $10,000. The next agency is North Suburban Legal Clinic. They requested $15,000, and last year we again approved $15,000. The committee was well satisfied with the services delivered to the agency and agreed to approve the requested amount of $15,000. Okay, the next agency, Northwest Compass. Again, this is a new agency requesting township funding. Their mission is to provide crisis intervention, counseling, and assistance to people experiencing housing instability and hopelessness. They're requesting 3 grants for a total of $80,000. First grant, Empowering Youth, $50,000. The second is for a food pantry, $25,000. And the third is a shelter program, $5,000. Now, the agency had 152 clients in Newton Township, and based on the units of service provided, it amounted to $28,000. But they have requested a total of $80,000 from the township. The committee noted that the food pantry is a duplication of services provided as residents could use the township's pantry as well as the agency's pantry, as there is no control measure in place. Okay. The funding request is too high, and Newton Township residents were 1% of clients served by the agency. And finally, the committee voted not to fund the agency. The next agency was Open Communities. Again, this is a new agency requesting township funding. Their mission is to eradicate housing discrimination and unjust practices that perpetuate segregation and inequality. Their request is $30,000 to assist low-income older people with housing insecurity. The agency projected 100 clients for the upcoming year, and they had 227 clients the previous year. The committee is concerned about the steep decline. When questioned about their service to the community, the agency responded that they are projecting a 15% increase in revenue without Newton Township and a surplus of $155,000. It was concluded that the agency was well funded and had a duplication of services by agencies the township has already been funding. Again, the committee voted not to fund this agency. The next agency is Pickles Group, which is to support youth who have a parent or guardian with cancer. They requested $30,000, and last year we approved them for $15,000. 31% of their clients are Nutria Township residents. And last year, they spent $31,000 on Nutria clients, when they were only approved for $15,000 from the township. In addition, they did a stellar job in measuring outcomes. The committee agreed to approve the $30,000 requested by the agency. The next agency is Rebuilding Together. Their mission again to repair homes of low-income homeowners so that they remain habitable. They requested $60,000. Last year, we approved $50,000. The increased request of $10,000 is to manage unexpected repair emergencies which occur year after year. The previous year, the agency provided $67,000 worth of services to Nutria clients. Thus, the committee agreed to approve the full request of $60,000. The next agency is the Volunteer Center. Their mission is to support volunteerism in Nutria Township by connecting potential volunteers to nonprofits. They're requesting $25,000. Last year, we approved $15,000. The increase of $10,000 is to provide funding for youth who want to volunteer and will require transportation and supervisory staff. The majority of the committee felt that this new service would create additional concerns, including liability issues, in addition to increased staffing costs. The committee raised 3 funding options to fund them at $15,000, $20,000, or $25,000. The committee voted to approve $15,000 and not the requested $25,000. Finally, the YWCA, the mission they give us is to eliminate racism and empower women through domestic violence services and women leadership programs. They requested $25,000. Last year, we approved them for $25,000. In the previous year, the agency spent $80,000 on Nutria residents, while the township funded them at $25,000. The agency often collaborates with the North Shore Legal Aid Clinic, and the committee finally decided to approve their full request of $25,000. Okay, so that is our review, and I'm open for questions.
Doctor, excellent presentation. It appears to me that the committee had, I'm gonna generalize a little bit, a very soft spot in their heart for cancer-related groups. Because what we see here is we see Cancer Wellness Center going from 25,000 to, you guys are recommending 60,000, that's more than a doubling. And we saw that again with Pickles, they were at 15,000 and the committee's recommending 30,000, which is a doubling. So those seem to be the two that, in my mind, we have to have really good justification to move agencies from that level of funding into these new levels of funding going forward. So can you shed a little color, give us a little color on why the Cancer Wellness Center deserves to be bumped from 25 to 60,000? They were last year approved for 25,000 for support services only. This year, we're proposing to bump that up from 25 to 45, plus adding 15,000 fresh for the wellness program.
Let me first answer your question regarding the Pickles group. As I said, the last year, they spent $31,000 on Nutria Township clients, and we funded them for only 15. So I mean, they calculated really what their true value was worth for this year, and so we agree with them that $30,000, you know, was a fair price to pay to cover costs.
Well, we usually, we don't give extra credit for them being under budget in the prior years. We don't catch them up because they didn't ask for enough for last year. I mean, once we start doing that, we're setting a dangerous precedent. Going forward, tell me some really good things that Pickles is doing that justifies an increase, other than reimbursing them for money that they maybe under requested in the past.
Well, only that the outcomes in terms of feedback that we've gotten from the grant application, the outcomes seem to be, you know, excellent. all around.
We wish that the outcomes were as good with our other agencies, but that they measured outcomes as well. How do they measure their outcomes at Pickles?
Well, basically, by providing us with the interviews that they had with the clients for the most part.
Plus satisfaction surveys.
Okay.
And I think one of the things we talked about in the committee in regards to the cancer agencies, well, with Bare Necessities still getting their amount from last year, but Pickles and Cancer Wellness Center, Pickles in particular, it being like a kind of still newer, but a homegrown agency that's exploded in growth over the last 2 years. You know, I've seen as I've gone to their receptions every year that the party, they get bigger, there are more kids, there are more families in the township in particular that are growing. And from what they've all told us, both them and the Cancer Wellness Center, that with cancer basically coming back to the forefront in a post-COVID environment, people have been postponing cancer screenings, putting them off. Plus with the Surgeon General's, I know this, they haven't talked about it, but recently the Surgeon General talked about alcohol and its cancer relation. And since alcohol use is up post-COVID, they're most likely gonna see people experiencing treatment for
The
alcohol.
COVID really rings true to me because a lot of people neglected elective follow-up, regular care, and because of that, cancers were allowed to grow, that they were missed by primary care physicians and their specialists, and then they got to higher stages. And had they gone for the regular care, but for COVID, they wouldn't be in the bad shape they're in. So that rings true. And if Pickles is saying that's bumping up their need, I mean, that makes sense.
Plus, the three agencies all, as they work together, they've all collaborated with one another to help refer patients or groups to one another based on what they can provide. So on their end, not only are they providing the value themselves with what they provide, but you know, if Cancer Wellness Center says, you know, we've got a family needs a support group, but we can't take them here. We've got Pickles group we can reference, and Pickles group says that we've got a younger family that needs some sort of gift of some kind that we don't provide. We've got Bare Necessities as well. And if Bare Necessities says, hey, we had a parent reach out, but we can't do anything because we work with kids, they can go to the Cancer Wellness Center. So with those three agencies together working in concert with their increased funds, their hope is that they can collaborate as well, so that anybody who goes to one of them could be able to access all three if needed, which would just, you know, amplify both what we do in terms of providing funding and give more wraparound services.
I think you're touching on the wellness programming of the Cancer Wellness Center.
Yes.
What is that gonna be involved? Yeah.
So the wellness program, from what they described to us, but when they described it as they had this program previously, but they weren't getting funding for it. So the whole wellness aspect goes just beyond the regular support services. So everything from the dietary aspects of what people with cancer will have to face with, to mental health screenings, to dealing with the medical center, even things like meditation and that sort of program, all of which is designed to help alleviate the burden on those who are suffering from them. So when Michelle initially talked to me about it, they had mentioned that they had had this type of program before, but they had just been doing general support services. And the committee even said that, hey, if you guys want to do a different program, you could apply for said different program. And when they explained the wellness programming to us, they did say, yeah, it does add up to be that 60,000 in total, but this new program is going to go a long way to help not only provide just basic social services or basic cancer services for those that are suffering with it, but creating the whole scope that goes with it beyond just like your counseling, your how do you deal with insurance, that type of stuff. You know, most people don't think about the dietary restrictions, which is the thing that stuck out to me. Like, how does a person or a family dealing with cancer eat? They can't maybe go back to fast food, or if the person is struggling to, you know, eat food, or they want to eat healthier, they might have to change their entire dietary regimen for the whole family. So a program like that could help them say, hey, you guys are used to cooking, you know, whatever meal, but if dad or mom or someone has cancer, now the whole family has to change how they eat. A program like this not only teaches them how to cook food, but like how to incorporate into their daily lives and how to keep building functional habits past treatments.
And I know the committee deliberated long and hard on this, because when you move an agency from that $25,000 level of funding into the $60,000 level going forward,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it amortized that over time, and I mean, it takes a big chunk of money to do that.
100%. And the Life Stages Committee definitely, and I gotta give kudos to Steve in the back, who, before our meeting started, he wanted us to refresh on like what the purpose of the committee was and the structures of it. So we very much balanced what services do they provide versus what is the financial value and what is the township supposed to do in terms of cost we can justify giving them. So it definitely was a hard bought out concern, but based on the services they provide and the value they gave, the committee basically said that Cancer Wellness Center and Pickles Group, both local, active, very involved, very heavy, probably going to see increased demand over the next few years, so the support was justified.
Much appreciated.
I mean, the notion that we have a soft spot for cancer, I mean, that would have to hold true for bare necessities also. But we don't, we didn't increase their grant, we kept it at $2,500 because we weren't satisfied.
And I didn't mean that in an insulting way at all. That's a generalization that.
Well, it's only two of the agencies.
And I think that there is legitimate reason to believe that these cancer-related agencies are gonna have huge demands and increases, in part related to COVID and so on and so forth.
And it's particularly, with it is, the township is concerned with helping residents who want to stay in place, if they're aged in place. As age increases, the likelihood or risk of cancer increases, which means not only will they be using services like the North Shore Senior Center, but if they're at the North Shore Senior Center and say, I got a cancer diagnosis, what do? They've got, Cancer Wellness and Pickles Group on call with us, so if they don't coordinate with each other, they can coordinate with me, and I can help try to coordinate some sort of version where they work together.
And Jeannie's well aware of that.
Yeah, Jean too, I'm in the process, I spoke to her yesterday, I'm gonna create after the board of trustees finalizes what's next for the agency partners, I'm gonna get contact points for anybody that she would work with more often than not in terms of like their social workers. So she has a set contact list for every agency, so if someone comes in and says, I have this problem, can you direct me? She has a whole contact list of what the specific agency is, what they would fit for, and who they could contact in need, so.
Thank you both for giving me some more color on the cancer.
Of course.
So I have some questions on Northwest Compass. Their proposal is something that we desired.
So did their presentation.
Really,
There was a lot of, we could circle back, or we can get back to you on that, or I don't know that offhand, and.
What was the question?
They're listed in Mount.
Northwest Compass's like proposal and the lack of
so
specificity.
did they mention that cause I'm looking right here, it says that it says 0 years funded for the SAFE program, which is not true. We funded them this year.
Not through the agency partners program.
Right,
That's
but I wanna know the usage of that program, and they didn't separate them out at all.
No, they basically, combine the units of service for all the programs. And the total that they spent was about $28,000 on New Trier Township. That was a question I asked at the hearing, was they did not separate out each of the grants in terms of utilization. And they admitted that what they did was combine everything, and the total amount of unit of service works out to around $28,000 that was spent.
Did anyone use SAFE? We even know that.
No, we don't know the details of the program.
I have the from their interview and meeting minutes, I can pull them and forward to you as
Yeah.
well, but nothing offhand pull. So just because, again, a lot of when we asked her stuff, it was very basic info about said programs, and I don't know, I can follow up with you. Which I think was part of the committee's concern, was that the presentation was lackluster and that they kind of just showed up thinking like if I remember correctly, the person that was presenting wasn't here very long, and they're like, I'm kind of here, so I'll answer whatever questions I can, but she didn't answer quite a few.
Where is
Did she follow up? Sorry.
She did, and I said, the committee wanted to follow up on some questions, and I never got a response,
Okay.
so,
Where's the food pantry and
Mount
where's the?
Prospect.
Mount Prospect.
right.
And where's the shelter program located?
Mount Prospect.
So that's too, their location basically makes it hard for anybody to use their services, because they would have to go to Mount Prospect to get some of the stuff.
Were they able to document whether any New Trier residents were actually doing
They
that?
didn't know, they don't keep track.
Oh, then they just had insufficient
keep track.
information.
Yes.
Right, so if you recall, the SAFE program was the one where you would go to a police station in the township and then you would get transport from there. The lift program, things like that. So that was a reaction to the fact there is no housing, no emergency housing in the township. So that's the problem. We have to go to Mount Prospect. Or, thankfully for DV, you can go to Evanston for the YWCA, but
Yes, much closer.
otherwise we really don't have emergency housing. So that's very disappointing.
Yeah.
But thank you, appreciate it.
They can, like I said, with like the Driven Foundation, and anybody else, they're always welcome to come back next year and,
Mhm.
try again.
Do you take a moment just to send them another email, just being like, I didn't get my response?
Yeah.
I'd love to see if they do respond.
Yeah,
with
for sure.
Faith specific
Sure.
utilization numbers. Because we do know that there's been a lot of people, a lot more homeless individuals hanging out, who could use the help.
For sure.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it as always.
Awesome. Great job.
Okay. All right, last but not least, mental health funding and oversight. Joe.
Well, I've got some tough shoes to follow after the last two presenters. All right, so we also had a great group, and I think everybody, all three of the committee members have been on this committee at some point, so appreciate all their efforts as well. All right, the first one to talk about is the Children's Advocacy Center. Unfortunately, with some miscommunication, they were the only ones that weren't able to present to us, and so we just went off of what they had provided in their report. So there was the Forensic and Advocacy Services Group, which for each of the 2 prior years, we had funded 9,000. This year, they again asked for 9,000, and that's our recommendation. However, they had this mental health services new program they presented on, and it was very vague. We didn't have a lot of detail about it. And so we said, hey, maybe next year when you present, you can tell us more about it and we'll entertain it then. But for now, we decided to take a pass on any funding for that. The Counseling Center of the North Shore, great organization. Like last year, they focused a lot on what were other similar companies that were applying for funding getting. And so even though last year they had received $56,250, they were asking for an increase of 132% to get them to 130,500. Now, but we made it clear to them that that we're not going there, but that's not where we intended to go. But we do agree that their costs were up by 18%. There were some other things to look at that justified an increase, not along the lines of what they had requested. And so we settled on going from 56,250 to 70,000, which is about 24.4% increase. Again, factoring all these other things about them, including the fact that their costs were up so much. Next was Erica's Lighthouse. With Erica's Lighthouse, each of the last 2 years, I'm sorry, the last year, 2023 and 2024, they just wanted $16,000 for the work they've done. They've gone national now, and so they're quite bigger than when they first presented requested funding many years ago. So we were fine with the recommendation to keep the amount the same at 16,000. All right. The Family Service Center of Glencoe asked for about a 10% year-over-year change from 50,000 to 55,000. And so we agreed that $5,000 amount or 10% made sense in light of just other things going on for them as well. The Family Service Center of Wilmette, they highlighted the fact that they had an increase of 21% of their New Trier Township clients year over year compared to the prior year. And with that in mind, they had requested to go from the 84,000 they had received last year to 96,600. And we agreed that made sense for us to approve along those lines. So 96,600 was what we agreed to for that. Next was Haven. Haven, I guess you could argue had the most the best turnout. So little history on the Haven. They've had their outreach and their family therapy for years. Then I want to say 2 years ago, I think 2 years ago this month,
Yeah.
they took over the warming center, which had been a separate standalone operation that just fell apart. I should say the leadership, they were in need of someone to oversee them. And so Haven stepped up and did that. The warming house they have is located in Wilmette that they had at the time. They'd been there historically. Based on some discussions with the Winnetka Park District, I believe it was, they concluded they would also start overseeing, turn the shelter at Indian Hill Park into a warming house as well. So it's really two different warming house locations for them. And I comment about the turnout. The peanut gallery back here was filled with students, among other people, as well as some staff.
The most I've ever seen an agency partner hearing full
Yeah,
public comment.
yeah. So they were here, and I know I, as one of the committee people, directed some questions to them, and I was really blown away. I mean, I must say, when I was 16, 17 years old, I probably wouldn't have gone to such a meeting like this, no matter how much I like the organization. But they were here, and they were talking all about it, and so it really hit. I think it struck a nerve for all of us. I don't want to talk for the whole committee, but I think we were all pretty impressed by them. So to kind of back into this now, what the numbers were. Last year, they had, the last 2 years, they had requested 80,000 for their outreach. And again, they requested 80,000, so we agreed with that. The family therapy, 38,000 in 22 and 23. Again, for 2024, they were requesting 38,000. And then for the warming house, which last year was only 40,000 a year ago, we agreed to their request to up it to 70,000. In light of the fact that they really had substantially changed their operations, it was quite a bit bigger and had in effect doubled what they were doing with the warming house before.
They've taken over the Wilmette Warming House and the Winnetka
And
Youth
when I say
Organization,
both of them,
also known as the YO, and we previously funded both of those separate youth organizations under a separate committee. So now Haven is taking over both of those
Yeah.
agencies. And by all accounts, it looks like they're doing a good job
Yeah.
with the new one, the YO in Winnetka.
So it's, just to be clear, it's not the Yo.
It's not the YO, but
It
it was
is
the YO.
what the Yo had done,
Yes,
or had at least proposed to do
right. It's
by
not the-
serving youth in Winnetka
They're now
Right.
replacing the YO with the Haven Warming House model.
model.
So now under Haven, we're essentially funding what used to be three separate agencies, all under one umbrella.
Right, so. And I don't know if you have this offhand, Steve, because I didn't ask you for it earlier, but ahead of the next meeting, if we could get the numbers for what we were spending on Winnetka. At
The
the
Yale and all
time,
that
just so
stuff.
we can compare kind of, location to location.
You want the numbers for Yo and the warming house in the previous years?
Well, so you have the warming house
Oh, yeah.
numbers here. If we could,
But
just.
yeah, just as when they were separate programs on their own,
Exactly.
yeah. I'll-
I'm pretty sure, I don't know this for sure, but I'm pretty sure that the 70,000 we're now spending on Warming House is less than what we were spending on Warming House plus YO in years past.
Which is what I would anticipate with the administration being
Yes.
shared,
Yes.
would be the hope. But, just to confirm.
For sure.
Yes. And it's a cool space, so.
And a great location.
yeah. Next is the Jocelyn organization. They had requested to go from 220,000 to 229. We thought that was a bit on the higher end. Their charges, their costs had only increased by 3.4%. So instead of going to 229 from 220, we went to 226, which represents about 2.7% increase for them. Peer services, so peer services, how to explain them? They had, last year they had, a year ago, they had 3 different groups. The substance abuse prevention group, the adolescent substance abuse treatment, and the adult substance abuse treatment. This year, they combined the latter 2 into what they call the substance use treatment. So they didn't, in other words, what had been adolescent and adult was just combined into one.
Yeah.
So the substance abuse prevention last year was at 40,000. They asked for an increase to go to 42.4 for that. And we concluded that made sense. We're comfortable with that relatively small increase there. The next one was the substance use treatment. Last year, when you add the 2 groups that were being combined, it was 20,750. They wanted to go to 34.6. And again, we just thought that that was a bit too much of a stretch for them. And so instead of going to 34.6, we recommended to go to 30,000. Okay, so when you add these 2 together, the total change for the peer services group is a little over 19%. All right, Samarica, Steady Eddie, they've been around for a long time in terms of what we funded them. 23 and 24, 23 we had funded for 25,000. 24 they requested the same amount, so no change. We were confident that that made a lot of sense. They still provide some good services to Nutrier clients as well, so we kept that unchanged. Thresholds. The one thing that stood out for thresholds is that the number of residents served has decreased. So originally they had requested 42,000, which was the same amount we had given them the year before. But now we landed on coming back to 40,000. And so obviously if they raise their numbers next year, we can always look at bringing it back up. But this would represent a decrease of about 4.8%. Only 2 more to go. Youth services. Youth services has 2 distinct programs. There's Pride and there's Share. And again, I can't remind me what Share was. Obviously Pride.
Yeah, Share was the program that I think was their group program, right? Where they hung out and did group activities as opposed to Pride, which was focused on the LGBTQ plus awareness.
That
Yeah.
sounds right.
Yeah.
So thanks for keeping me honest on that.
Of course.
So the one thing about them is their Pride program had decreased during the year in terms of their numbers. Not really sure why, obviously appreciate the work they do, but with that in mind, even though they had received 65,000 last year and they were requesting 65,000 again this year, we settled on 60,000. And so that's just a 7.69% decrease. The final.
I think it had anything to do with weren't they out of their building for a while?
They were for a bit, but they said they've had less people coming to some meetings, although with the future being what it is in terms of LGBTQ experience, they suspect that they might have an increase going forward. So they'll let us know and we'll be in contact with them. But yeah, there was a drop off, but I think particularly after November, they're very concerned. They've had concerns that people reach out and there's gonna be potential growth with that. So we'll keep in touch with them and monitor.
Last one is Zacharias Sexual Abuse Center. A year ago, they had received $5,000. They requested we go to 7,000. So when you look at the change, it's a 40% increase. But we're very much in line and in favor of the work they do, and so we thought the $2,000 increase made sense, so we recommend going to 7,000 for that. So I know I glossed over some of these a little bit quicker. Anything to focus on?
Any questions?
There was a common theme in mental health. And that is that the demand for services across the board is uniformly up, even though not necessarily in the township for every program. But the demand is up, and mental health issues are huge, related, of course, coming out of COVID. And then also related to the adversarial nature of things and political situation, especially as it affects groups that feel that they might go backwards in terms of their enfranchisement, you know, there's real concern. And then, of course, you have, it seems like there's a growing awareness of mental health too, when a great swimmer like Michael Phelps starts making commercials and talks about how wonderful it's been for him. So I think the demand is going to be very, very high in the coming years, and getting and retaining qualified mental health clinicians is a huge issue. All these agencies struggle with retaining the best people and in finding new people to meet the growing demand. So, I mean, these were difficult decisions, but I thought that the committee, you know, and it's not always reflected in the presentation. The committees, all three committees, the individual members just dive deep, and they're trying to wrestle with protecting taxpayer funds and meeting the needs of the committees and making sure that they've got robust ability to help our township residents. I mean, it's a challenge. And for us as trustees to overturn the work of, or, you know, to overturn the work of some of these committees, it's not an easy thing to do. I mean, you have to give a lot of credence to the hard work that they put in, even though it's not always reflected in the presentation. It's, I just thought everybody did a great job tonight.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Last comment, if I may. I had the pleasure of working with Brian Leverance in this role, but Steve has done at least as solid of a job and probably more so since then. He's changed a lot of things, come in with a creative approach that has definitely been welcome, so. I'm
Appreciate it. Absolutely.
You guys are much obliged. So just to put a cap on the end of it here, a lot of the stuff, this is in my report too, but just the basics breakdown. So I have the spreadsheet in my report for each committee with the breakdown for the lines for the last 2 years. So in total, so for the Life Stages Committee, it was a total of $440,300 for 18 programs over 12 agencies. Disability recommended $442,000 for 16 programs through 11 agencies. And mental health, overall recommended $865,000 for 16 programs through 13 agencies. This I just had to calculate because I didn't put it in here. So the total amount for those three would be about $1,747,300. Compared to what was approved in last year's budget, $1,601,300. It's about $146,000 or a 9.1% increase. And I do want to thank all of the committee members who all just left. Thank them all.
They're gonna all watch the video.
For sure. And as Elliot mentioned, over multiple meetings from September to December, there was a lot of review and a lot of substantial discussion about what services were provided and how much they cost and what justified. And, you know, talks about what are our core responsibilities as a township and as a government, and what is our responsibility to fund. And with the guidance of our, you know, liaisons who were all here, you guys did an excellent job in helping to help me guide the committees and make sure we ask the right questions. And I know you guys will, when you guys make your final decisions, you'll put just as much forethought into it as they did. So thanks for putting your trust in me to do this process. And I want to thank all the committee members and the chairs and liaisons for proving that, aside from the many jokes one can make about committees, like how, you know, how Camel is a horse designed by committee. I do really believe in the committee process, and I do believe that it can function really well and helps provide. And for this particular model for the township, it goes a long way, and you can see in the reports and when talking to people in the presentations, the actual human help that we're providing to people. And it's a good feeling to know that what you do matters, and the things that we do here and the money we allocate and the services we provide go a long way and change the lives of people and the residents. So thank you all for letting me present with the committee chairs.
Stefan, I'm sorry, Stephen, extremely well said, extremely well said, and there's just one thing I wanna add, I kind of have heard this over the last couple of years, and I certainly heard it from mental health this time around. The consensus of the committee members is this, that if we as the board are inclined to wanna buck their recommendations, either, add money where money hasn't been asked for, or take money away that, they kind of wanna have a chance, if we can incorporate that, to maybe respond. So in other words, if we decide for some reason that we don't wanna follow the recommendations to the T, they're asking if they can have a chance to find out what cases those are in and maybe have a chance to respond. Do you kind of get that sense, Stephen?
Indeed, yeah.
And I think that is an extra safeguard for the taxpayer too. I mean, we have the final say, and we will have the final say no matter what, but to give them the chance to respond is maybe not a bad thing to consider.
Then, I mean, everyone is welcome to come to the next meeting, right? But it's not,
Will we have time? Will there be, if we choose to change things, will there'll be time for them to consider our recommendation?
Respectfully, these are advisory committees. They are advising us as the elected officials that are the board. They've had their say. We have their minutes, we have the presentations of their chairs. We have, we can go back and we can review the videos that Steve, made for, each of their meetings. And I think it's incumbent on us to make the decisions.
right,
I agree with that, but there's this principle in law called rebuttal. And don't we add an extra safeguard for everybody in the
It's not a
township?
courtroom. We're
It's-
not in a courtroom.
But it just, the idea that they could have some chance to respond to what our concerns might be, which might help us before we finalize those decisions. I'm just saying it's an extra level of work, but it's something to consider. And I'm not making a motion, but I just want us to think about it going forward. Do we want to maybe have this additional step where the committee has a chance to maybe respond to any differences that we're proposing?
I'm going to again reiterate, they're invited to come to the meeting. And if there are questions that this board wants to direct to them, can do that. Obviously, there's no, cross discussion. But we will, in an orderly fashion, continue our deliberations.
And the next meeting is the decision meeting.
Yes,
Okay.
And that's the February, I don't have the date on there.
exactly.
So I know that in terms of our committee schedule, the mental health committee would meet the first Monday of February, and disability and life stages would meet the fourth Wednesday and Thursday. So in terms of responding, it could be kind of difficult for one to happen before and the two to happen after. But if whatever does happen in those discussions, I can talk to the two committees afterwards and explain if I'm here and listening to say what happens, and they could use that time to give their statement about, whatever the board of trustees decide, and that'll just be in the meeting minutes. If that makes sense.
Certainly can put it in their meeting.
Right,
minutes.
but they could also just come to the main meeting as well, if they wanted to
That's-
listen to and
I would
discuss it.
very much encourage that rather than an ex post.
If it's on Zoom, I guess I could just send it all out to everybody to say if they wanna watch an input comment while listening to the public meeting, that's perfectly fine, right?
Correct, they're
And
members.
that may be the thing to remind them of that, historically, there tends not to be much discrepancy between what the board often defers entirely.
Yeah.
But every now and then there is a little bit of a change, so if they wanna have the chance to say something, that's the opportunity. to do
For
it.
sure. So when you do have your next meeting, I'll make sure to send them the link, the agenda and the link in the Zoom and say, hey, if you guys are interested or you have the time, sign up for the Zoom thing, or if you wanna come in person, and then, however you guys wanna handle discussions with them, public comment or whatever,
Right.
totally fine,
Our meetings are always open.
of course.
Yep. Oh, we are in line for public comment. Public comment?
Oh, great.
What timing?
No, I concur with Elliot's comments. I served for 6 years on the disability committee. And it is really helpful if the numbers change at this level to just the committee to understand the thinking and the thought process and your standard of review and what you look at for final funding. So if you don't do like a second reading and give it a chance to kind of percolate, you make a decision at the next meeting, then definitely it would be very helpful, at least in my humble opinion, to have the committees or the chairs at least know and have an opportunity that they want to participate or somewhere in there to know the numbers and give some feedback in case you'd like to just give it a little more thought before you write those checks to those committees.
Right.
Because as you all know, as being liaisons, how much work and time and effort that goes into it. I mean, we spent a lot of time, not just at those meetings, but for 6 years. We also put in, however many terms you serve, a lot of time at home doing homework. And so it's greatly appreciated when we know what the reasoning is and the
Absolutely.
standards that you use so that we can more better match that perhaps going forward. So it won't be such a.
And we want to retain those committee members
Absolutely.
too.
Yeah.
And
yes.
not discourage.
Exactly, yes, so, thank you.
Any additional public comment? Seeing none, new business. You have strategic planning proposal from Corey Flash. Am I saying that right, Corey?
Yes, perfect.
Planning, we had initially hired with the hope that this would be a staff endeavor. It has not turned out that way. I think Corey's proposal is extremely reasonable and wanted to open it up for discussion or questions for Corey since she was nice enough to join us.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask about the strategic planning. In one place it's called a workshop, in one place it's called a retreat that's, potentially scheduled right now for March 4th. And I wanted to see if one of two things might be possible with this. Either to postpone it until after the election or to request that our slated candidates also be a part of that endeavor, considering that they would be with us for the next 4 years.
That's a very good point.
So that's a thought there. Then I also wanted to see if, and Corey, this may be directly for you. I noted that the village manager of Glencoe was on your reference list. Have you worked with any other agencies within New Trier Township? So, Winnetka, Wilmette, Glencoe, obviously, Kenilworth, sections of Northbrook and Glenview.
I have not worked with anyone else in New Trier other than Glencoe. I just flew back in I was in Little Elm doing focus groups last night. I concentrate, the only organizations I work with are local governments and nonprofits. So I am very focused in mission-driven organizations. I work in Illinois, Wisconsin, Iowa, and then periodically, Texas, Washington State, kind of in Tennessee. I've got a client in, but the only one I've worked with though in New Trier Township is Glencoe.
Okay. And then in terms of the stakeholder engagement that is excluded from the fee, is that simply the survey of the food pantry recipients, or would that be something else?
So that is two things. So I have agreed as part of this to assist with developing a survey. So I worked with for a company for a number of years that actually did the National Community Survey. If you've ever heard of that, that is the largest resident satisfaction survey nationally. And so I agreed to assist with developing survey questions because it can be pretty tricky, particularly if you have got if you're doing it with people who speak more than one language, to be able to do something where Google Translate, you've had to be pretty careful with that. So I agreed to assist with developing a 5-question survey. I'm not going to collect that data, you guys will, but I will assist with that. But then also the SWOT survey. So what the SWOT survey is: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. I use that as a basis for my retreat. We use that to get to the strategic issues. What I find is that a lot of times when we're talking through strategic issues, Some people are really good in dynamic situations and they're great with being able to kind of come up with stuff on the fly. Other people really appreciate the fact that they can kind of, with a survey, come in and out, really kind of think about that. So a survey works well. So when I'm talking about stakeholder engagement, I'm really talking about staff, board, whoever we would be attending that retreat.
Do you have any concerns about the survey only being for people that are already coming to our office? And specifically not the greater community?
That is
We have an issue with people, paying their real estate bill, and part of that comes to us. But I walk down the street every day and people have no idea who we are and what we do. So is there any concern that we are being myopic by only surveying the people that we are literally handing food to?
100%. So here's the thing though. So, and I'm preaching to the choir here, but let's talk though about the challenge of townships. A lot of people do not understand what townships do, right? So we've got a couple of issues in there. First of all, we have to have people understand what townships do, and then we have to get to them. The best way to do that, to be perfectly honest with you, is a statistically valid survey, and that's $25,000, $30,000 plus.
Yeah.
That is not something that I do. I can certainly recommend some places to do that, but that's going to be the best way for you to do that. In my conversations with staff, my understanding at this point is that you really kind of just want a little bit of assistance to kind of get a good start. And I can come in and help you with that. At some point in time, you may very well want to do a much more comprehensive effort. It's going to be a whole lot more than what my proposal is in order for you guys to do a statistically valid survey. Again, I'm happy to give some recommendations for some ones that specifically do resident satisfaction surveys. I think that would be great, but particularly for a township, it's tricky because a lot of people don't understand the role the townships play.
I want to say that, Corey, you sound like you're the excellent person for this job. I echo what Supervisor Eisenberg said. This seems to be a reasonable proposal, and you can definitely get us focused and get us motivated and get us excited about what we need to do. You can pass us the ball and we can run with it. And I also agree with what Trustee McNally said, that I really think this needs to start after the election and the new people are in place. As much as I and Danielle would love to participate and work with you, we've got two new folks coming in. So I agree that it's got to start after the election.
And
please.
that was really just kind of proposed dates because we'll have to get calendars to match up and all the rest of it. But it was more just to have you guys understand what timeline looked like and how long it takes between each of the different phases. But we're very agreeable in terms of dates.
Anything else?
Do you want a motion?
So, yeah, I would like to approval from the board to engage with Corey so we can get this underway.
So moved.
There's a second.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none. All right, Corey, we'll be in touch as we figure out dates, but I will send you back a document by the end of the week.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I look forward to working with everyone.
Us too. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
You guys haven't taken a look at Glencoe's strategic plan? It looks fabulous.
Did they sign on to the exact thing that we signed on to?
They did not. It is a little bit more extensive. But
It's a little more extensive, yeah.
we have a very extensive tax base.
But they may have started a little smaller in the beginning.
No, they're much bigger entities.
Oh, okay.
Let's be honest. Yes, but I follow Phil.
Glencoe is bigger than the township?
Their budget is.
Their budget is bigger than the township?
Yes.
Oh,
But as you will all know, there are more residents in Nutria Township than Greenland.
Well, yeah, just a few more.
Just a few. Okay, important knowledge. All right, we have received reports from our staff. Is there anything anyone wants to take from the staff reports for discussion?
Yeah. Larisha, are you well enough to turn on for just a sec?
I am here.
Awesome. I know we're all sending you our best wishes. Under the building maintenance, the heating issue, was this heating unit still under warranty?
Yes.
And are we gonna have to pay anything for this to be fixed?
No,
Okay.
so they've been out several times now. I think that this is like the third time. First, the issue was the air, now the issue is with the heat. My suspicion is if I have to call them one more time, I'm just gonna tell them to put another one on the building.
All right.
Because they're the maintenance board or the computer board or something, that was the issue on Friday when they came out and fixed it. All of these fixes are taking like 2 hours plus to do. One guy was there for the whole 8-hour shift 2 weeks ago. So we've been dealing with no heat on the first floor again, but apparently the staff said that now it's fixed, which is good.
All right.
But it's still on my radar.
Okay, and then with respect to the banking issue, I know that it's a bit of a mess with the renovation, well, the whole building that they're working on right now. But I know that Chase in Winnetka is literally we could throw a rock from the township and hit it. And it might be nice to kind of see if we could engage with them as somebody who's other than BMO Harris. To kind of, I'll be the one in Stefan's absence to say diversify a little bit there.
Yeah.
So.
I have an appointment with Wintrust, North Shore Community, they work in tandem. And the lady, I was on her calendar and they said, oh, she's not in today. And I was like, well, I was on the calendar. So, yeah, so anything like local. I know that at one point we did have a small account at North Shore Community. But Chase is another good option and it's close for me to be able to go and do deposits and stuff like that.
That's what I'm
Yeah,
thinking.
Larisha, Northern Trust surprisingly has not been very receptive to us, have they?
No.
Neck of branch.
No.
And they still have not even gotten back to us about our debit card that we applied for almost 2 months ago either. It's not, I need them to be more responsive than that, especially when Gail is only in the office once per week. Like we have business to take care of. And their customer service for them to be in Wilmette, they always direct us downtown Chicago. Well, we're not downtown Chicago. We're right here in the township that you guys are working in. And they
Right.
won't give us
They seem to, the business model has changed. They're more interested in high net worth individuals and they're not as interested in municipal relationships. It's a shame.
Anything else?
Thank you, Larisha.
You're welcome.
Just want to thank the staff on the record for the holiday programming. Really went very smoothly. And the weather cooperated relatively well. So thanks for the weather too.
Larisha, it was
We
a
really bad right now.
wonderful party. It
And
was-
the
Oh,
party was
thank
great.
you. It was a good party.
Yes, so everyone should go hang out at Pizza by Sale / Brussels. Okay, anything else? Just keep an eye out for some of these special meetings coming up. If anyone is interested, we are hosting the Township Supervisors of Cook County on Thursday for lunch. We will be having a speaker from Top Box to discuss how they provide discounted nonprofit foods for food deserts and food pantries, since they are homegrown out of Winnetka.
That's this Thursday, 16th.
Yep, for lunch.
Nice, doing it up here. Excellent.
Yep, and we will be catering from Will's Place, which is a Skokie-based restaurant that employs people with disabilities.
Wonderful.
So-
What kind of a turnout do you think you'll get?
We're already at, I think, 15.
Outstanding.
Yeah, so it should be a good time. Other than that, I wish you all a good night and I will see you in February. All right, we need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No, okay.